Welcome to the Regenaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Griggs. Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more. Alongside me is Amy from Sell Beef Direct. Thank you for joining, Amy.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So to get started, you and your husband are first generational ranchers, is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
And that started back in 2018?
We bought the ranch we're on now in 2018, but we started in 2014 on a tiny wee 6-acre property.
So
Both working full time.
Interesting. What was the catalyst to doing that in 2014?
It was always a dream of ours. So we both come from the maritime industry. We've lived on the ocean, and we're both engineers. But it was always a dream to raise cattle, to raise beef, to know where your food comes from, and like provide an ethical food source. Pretty pretty strange for a former vegetarian, but and it was just a dream of ours. So we kind of started with 6-acre kind of urban property. Like it was rural, but it was very close to a town. So I mean, like it wasn't big. And we had some horses that we boarded, and we went to the auction and got 4 steers. 4 Hereford steers that we fattened up, and we kept one for ourselves, and we sold 3. And we're like, wow, that was kind of easy. Can we do this on a bigger scale? And we kept on doing that just on our 6 acres to the point where I think we had like 22 head or something, that we leased 2 kind of 10 to 20 acre parcels that we would graze them on all as much as we could. And then we would bring them home in the winters into like a sacrifice area and just like feed haylage and hay, until it was like, right, if we're going to do this, we better do it. And we bought the ranch we're on now. So then we moved here with only 13 head in 2018. We both still worked full time. We're like 5 hours away from the coast from where we were, and we would take it in turns to go into the office, so to speak. And then December of that year, so December 2018, we both handed in our notice, and that was it. Beef had to be our only sole source of income, and it had to work.
So whenever you had the first cow and you had that for yourself and your family, what was that experience like after just having that first food from that was you guys, versus just going to the grocery store or the farmer's market? I'm just curious what that was like.
It's pretty cool having it all in your freezer, like the access. Like you find that you eat, it goes fast. I always tell customers it goes faster than you think because you have it there. It's not like you're like, oh, what are we gonna do for dinner tonight? It's just we have beef. We have so much ground. We have so many steaks. We have so many roasts. Like it's just so easy to just grab something and go. It was awesome, yeah.
Because whenever I switched into agriculture last year, I had never visited a ranch or farm. I maybe as a kid for some school field trip, but nothing that I can really remember. And I never really went to farmers markets. So whenever I visited the first ranch and it wasn't even my property. I didn't do anything with the cattle, but just having the farm fresh produce plus their beef was literally a life-changing meal because it just not only tasted better, but you felt more connected to the natural world in a sense. And so I can only imagine doing that whole entire process for yourself and then having that as an experience with your family would be quite the surreal experience.
It's pretty cool, yeah. I mean, it's something that I think people forget is it's the consumer who drives the industry. So if the consumer is always just going for the easy option and just going for like the quick fix processed food or whatever, the industry will never change. But if the consumer is driving support local, support farm fresh, they are the driver, and it kind of makes it more acceptable. Like I was doing some research last week for some material I'm working on, and the most readily available statistics are all from the States. Even though I'm in Canada and I'm from the UK, the most readily available stats you find are all for the USA. And it's only 8% of farms in the USA sell direct. Only 8% out of over 2 million. It's actually 7%, and then 1% sells through local intermediaries. So they've kind of been lumped into the sell direct. So on one hand, you have this massive following. People want to buy farm to fork. They want to know their rancher. They want to know where their food comes from. But there's this massive disconnect in, well, it's not that readily available. You think it is, but 8% is nothing.
No, that's a good segue into the sell beef direct. So whenever you first you you and your husband handed in your notice in 2018,
Mm-hmm.
uh, did you also start working on this side of things too, in terms of the
No.
direct to consumer, or what led to that?
Well, direct to consumer, yeah. So we always wanted to sell. Our whole business model was sell direct. It was never pairs. It was never feeders. It was never taking anything to auction. It was always raise beef and sell to a direct to consumer market. That was our business plan. That's how we got our funding. It was something that hadn't really been seen. Um, and that's just what we wanted to do. And we started with, I think we started doing like 1 head a month or 2 head a month, and then we just slowly grew from there, to the point where we're in British Columbia. We're a grass-fed and finished beef ranch, though we don't like using grass-fed and finished as a term. We think it's kind of overused, wishy-washy. I don't know. It's just, we are a regenerative ranch, so we follow Nicole Masters of Integrity Soils. We Our soil health is as important as our livestock health, so we do everything regeneratively. So we don't hay. We kind of make our pastures as nutrient dense as possible with cover crops. So we do no-till seeding, and we have pea and barley and sunflowers and brassicas and alfalfa and vetch and clovers so our pastures are so thick and diverse, and then we rotate them through. So if we were to hay where we are, you're lucky to get a second cut. Like, we get a first cut, a second cut is pretty slim, but we can rotate our cattle through 4 or 5 times a year. So I don't know. It's like this. But funnily enough, when we moved here with like gallons of graze on and Roundup and all sorts to kill everything, so we could reseed and replant. And then the local farm advisory here put on this talk with Nicole Masters, and Scott went to it, my husband, and he came home. He was like, "Oh my God, we're doing it all wrong, and we have to change." And I think at that point we'd only plowed one field. He's like, "We have to stop." So we never plowed any more fields. I think we still have all the gallons of that disgusting stuff somewhere. And we went completely regenerative. And then the next year we hosted a clinic here with her. She came back. And I never, like, it was all Scott's thing. And he was like, "You need to attend." I'm like, "Nah, there's loads of people here. You're fine. I'm just gonna go and do my thing." He's like, "No, you have to." I was like, "Well, I'll do one day." And I did one day, and I was like, "Oh my God," I was just hooked. It was like, this is amazing. And yeah, and the rest, as they say, is history. So we don't call it grass fed and finished beef. We call it regeneratively raised. It's grain free, but it eats so much more than just grass.
Nicole Masters is awesome. I was at
She is
the
awesome.
National Bison Conference at the beginning of January, and she spoke there, and I could see why he had the same sentiment after listening to her, because
Hmm.
I still have yet to
And
read
he's
her
Kiwi
book.
too.
Uh, but that is interesting too, just in terms of labeling. I mean, in the context of America too, with especially meat, it's all over the place. Um, so that's just a whole nother topic too. But as you're continuing to grow, because I know on your Instagram you've talked a lot about pre-selling. Did you start that
Mhm.
whenever you first started in 2018, or what was that process like in terms you have the ranch and you're wanting to do direct consumer? I guess what was that plan looking like whenever you first got that head of cattle?
Well, we didn't have anywhere to store anything, and we didn't want to be sat on in inventory that you couldn't sell or we couldn't sell, and then you're kind of stuck with freezer beef, and it's kind of got a shelf life, not really, but in like the terms of the consumer market, it does. So we started with advertising, really, but not advertising as in, we didn't run ads or anything like that. It was more buy and sell groups. Like way back then, I mean, it's like what, 5, 6 years ago. Facebook wasn't quite as strict as it is now. Now you can't sell any kind of animal product at all. You get banned. Unless, well, I think if you're running ads to and something off site, it's different, but you can't post buy my steaks. Like they kind of slap you down. But back then I would just go on to our local buy and sell pages, and it'd be, like ranch raised beef, available end of next month. And people would pay a deposit. They'd pay us $100. Um, we would like have a spreadsheet, and then the $100 would get taken off their balance, and we would go on this little delivery route. And at that point, we were doing an eighth, which is we call it a mini side. It's like an eighth of a cow, a quarter, a side, and a whole. And the eighths were super popular, and we would just make them up out of stock, out of a carcass that we allocated to stock. But we couldn't store anything, so things had to be delivered when we picked them up, and then it just kind of grew from there. Like we could store a very small amount. We just had two massive big, and I mean massive, like bigger than a coffin, deep freezes. And yeah, it just was from there. And if you pre-sell, you take the risk away. Like I guess the customer has the risk, that you could be dishonest, but then I don't know, that's the same in any industry really. And you've not taken all their money, you've taken $100. Our deposit is bigger now, but pre-selling was the key, to kind of grow the business.
So, I what? I guess the first question is, how do you pronounce your ranch, by the way?
Waikikahei.
Waikikahei.
Waikikahei. Waikikahei.
So I'm curious, what's the backstory behind the name of that?
So my husband's a Kiwi.
Hmm.
He's from New Zealand, and where we in Scotland and you guys in Northern America, you say like the sticks or the boonies. Um, they say Waikikimukau, and it's spelled Mukau, but it's pronounced Mukau. And we kind of laugh at that, and we wanted that as a ranch name. Like we thought that'd be quite funny. Why Kikamukau? And when we went to register, when we were kind of doing all our incorporation, there is a ranch in Saskatchewan that is owned by a Kiwi, and he's called it Waikikimukau. So we're like, darn. So our last name is Hay, Hay. So it's kind of like a play on that. So it's
Mm.
Waikikahei, but it's spelled Hei. Um, and loosely translated, it means tranquility over running water. And we have 3 or 4 creeks that run through the property. And some of them hadn't even been registered yet when we bought this place. So when they came down and did like a water survey, they actually named one Waikikahei Creek.
That is
Kind
awesome.
of, and it's a great conversation starter.
Yeah, no, that's so cool. So I'm curious, also, since moving on to this ranch, what's it been like just raising your family on there too? Because I know you two are in the city as well, and that's obviously a vastly different experience than where you're at now.
And we both come from really rural backgrounds. Like I'm from the north of
Mm.
Scotland, and when I grew up, there wasn't a store. Like you had to drive for hours and then take a ferry over the firth to get your groceries. It was like an all
Wow.
day trip. So like I'm pretty used to being remote. And my husband's from super remote New Zealand, where they still had a party line on the phone. You would pick it up and see if anyone else was on the line. And he had to do school. He was in correspondence school, so it was like they got sent a booklet in the mail. And we're not that old; like we're in our 40s, so it's not like we're going back hundreds of years. It was just super remote. So this isn't is not that much of a stretch. I think everyone, when you get to that kind of stage in your life, like, you've gone to uni, you're young, city life is awesome. Like, you party, you have the social life, but this is home. Like, we even ask our kids, would you move back to the coast? And they're like, no. They want to stay here. So that's kind of cool.
What do they like about it so much?
So one of the things that we have here that is pretty amazing is we have a 4-day school week. So we don't, the kids go to school Monday to Thursday. So every weekend is a 3-day weekend. They do an extra hour a day, or an extra half an hour a day. And then when most schools break up for like summer, say on the 21st of June, they break up on the 23rd. Like they kind of make up those because they have to do the time or something. I don't know. but they love the 4-day school week, and they did that because it's quite rural with lots of bus routes. It was to save the schools. Like they took out a day in all the busing, and that relieved enough budget to keep all the schools open. This was like 20 odd years ago. So the kids love that. But they love being able to walk out the door and go riding. Or my son's now more into ATVs and dirt bikes. Our little local ski hill is 2 minutes away, so they ski and snowboard all winter. There's lakes everywhere. Like I think there's a more varied social life rurally because there's always like there's bonfires and there's sledding and snowmobiling. Like there's no matter what the weather is, there's so much happening everywhere. It's kind of cool.
The one thing I love about all of that is the one common thing is just being outside and just
Yes.
because now that's just completely flipped upside down to where we spend most of our time indoors, and that's the biggest change I've made personally the last couple of years is just trying to get as much sunlight as possible, and that is just such a night and day difference. I know this is kind of getting
Mhm.
off topic a little bit, so I'll transition a little
Okay.
bit going to the Sell Beef Direct because I found that before I found your ranch's Instagram page, and I just loved everything that you're sharing on there. So I'm just curious, what made you want to start that and just posting, and what are your goals with all that? Because
Yeah,
yeah, it's just awesome.
it was last year 2022. So last year, I would post like we're really trying to grow our ranch, like to grow the ranch page, not just for beef, but for education on regenerative agriculture and the beef industry as a whole, and to really have a voice out there against the lab meat and the fake meat and the cows are bad kind of narrative. I really wanted to have something out there that was a resource for, you know, lobbying for agriculture and for cows. So I would do lots of reels and posts, and I was getting so many emails and messages of how do we do what you do? How do we become a first generation rancher? How do we sell direct? To the point where I was literally saying, here's my number, call me. And I'd be on the phone for hours. And then I'm like, I wonder if I should do something with this. So um, in January of this year, I launched Sell Beef Direct. And it's just kind of taken off. Like it got super, it was kind of plodding away, but like way from launching, I had people signing up, like people wanting to buy guides and people wanting to talk and people wanting calls because it was a resource that people needed, but there wasn't really anything there. Like I know there's some big names in the area, in the kind of in this realm, but they're very expensive, and some farmers I feel they need a lifeline and they don't need to be spending multi-thousand dollars for that lifeline because when it comes down to feeding your cattle or buying a course, I don't know a farmer who's not going to feed their cattle, you know what I mean? Like it's
Hmm.
just there just seemed to be a disconnect, and I wanted to reach those people who really needed a lifeline, really needed help, really needed to change things around to make their farm profitable again. And that's kind of what grew Sell Beef Direct. And it's been amazing. Like it's been a journey, but since I think May of this year, it's just steamrolled, and it's super exciting. I think at my last count, so I have like a free Facebook group, and I have my newsletter, and I try and give so much away for free. And then I also have a course um, where I kind of teach one to one, one to many to kind of help farmers go from never having sold anything direct to market to selling out. And and that's growing too. I'm on my second course now, but I think there's now a wait list that I think I'm going to have to make changes and make it an evergreen so that people can sign up whenever they want. They're not restricted to the next one's not till January or the next one's not till April. So it's just kind of I'm not quite sure where it's going, but I know it's going. But there's like I think I have about 1,000 people signed up in one form
Wow.
or another. But that's like from the free group.
Yeah.
I mean, I have 25,000 followers on Instagram. I'm not really including them in that, but people who have actually personally signed up to something is around about 800 to 1,000 farmers and ranchers.
That is
So and I'd
awesome.
love to help thousands more.
Yeah. Well, see, and I mentioned this right before we started. With farming and ranching, you're not just a farmer and rancher. You're a carpenter, a mechanic, a plumber, a
A vet.
veterinarian. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you're also a business person. But a lot of, from my personal experience and just um, from hearing others too, a lot of them are awesome at a lot of those things, but might not be the best at selling. And so I'm
Hmm.
curious, just from your experience so far, what are some I'm just curious to hear some of the conversations and just some of the major pain points that these folks talk about. Is it, yeah, I'm just curious about that.
One of the like there's they all kind of interconnect, but one of the main pain points that I hear from people is people won't pay my prices, or people won't pay what I need them to pay, or I can't find customers. And the two are linked in that people will pay your prices. You're just talking to the wrong people. And not to be discriminatory or anything like that, but it also goes back to the consumer drives the market. That if more and more people are looking to buy direct, it will bring the price down. But right now, you can go into Walmart or go into whatever store, and you could probably buy a pound of ground for $2 or $3. I can't produce it for that, so that person is not my customer. They should be buying that beef if that's the only beef they can afford to buy. Amazing, it's beef, eat it. But for people who are conscious about the environment, conscious about supporting local, conscious about um, health, etc., then you target a different set of people, and they will pay your prices. So dropping your price is not a sales strategy. You kind of have to remove that block, and you're not going to gouge them, but you need to get the price you need to be profitable. But you also need to find those customers, and that's kind of the disconnect that people don't seem to understand. They're trying to compete with everybody, and if you try and do that, then nobody wins. You got to stick to your niche or your market once you've identified them. That makes
Sounds
sense.
no,
Am
that
I
definitely does.
rambling?
No, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Going back to whenever you were mentioning just the, the sheer number of direct to consumer farms and ranches in America is rather low, and I'm assuming
Hmm.
that you've talked to a lot and have helped out with American farmers and ranchers. Have they?
Yeah. I so my client base is I have some in Canada, some in the States, some in Australia, and some in Ireland. And they've all signed up to my course, but people who are signing up to the free group and the free information and the new newsletter are from all over. There's people from South Africa, there's people from Europe. Like it's a process that fits no matter where you are, and it's something that's needed everywhere. Like if we support local, you strengthen your local economy, which strengthens employment opportunities. Like if you were to spend $10 locally, 68% of that, so $6.80 stays within your local, and just goes around and around, it stays there. Whereas if you are buying from Walmart, I think it's not even a percent, it's like 0 point something percent stays within your local economy. So it's like, well, you want to provide food security and employment opportunities locally before you do it internationally. And I think that's kind of what some people forget.
Will Harris talks about that all the time with White Oak Pastures and
He's awesome.
yeah, because I just listened to his most recent podcast on Joe Rogan, and he was just
Yeah.
talking about how with Bluffton, that county was the poorest in America, and I forgot, I think 2020, but then how bringing back the local economy through what he's doing, more and more
Hmm.
dollars stay in that county, and it takes time,
Yeah.
but you're so spot on with all of that. So
If you go back in time, like if you go back in time to like, I don't know, even like a couple of 100 years ago, if you had a thriving agricultural community, you were an affluent community because you provided jobs and living and food for everyone. I mean, like they were the hub of any kind of prosperity was what the land could produce, whether that's mining or whether that's food. Everything came from the land. Whereas now it's I don't know, it's not. Like people kind of have forgotten that and they look more for international and yeah, what's the cheapest I can get? But then what are the implications of that? It's coming
Yeah.
from overseas.
I mean, whenever you go into, especially in the context of bigger cities, um, you expect everything to be fully stocked and have no idea where it's coming from whenever you go into a
Mm.
store. And yeah, it's really interesting on that. And that's why, I mean, why I've started this and switching to agriculture, because I realized how disconnected I was from everything. And I know more and more people are starting to wake up to that same exact realization that
Mm.
shit, I have no idea the last time I've gone to a rancher farm. I don't remember last time I've bought something outside of a grocery store, and so it's interesting to see where that's headed. I'm curious on you're mentioning that you work with folks in New Zealand and Ireland and the States and Canada. Are the rules around selling direct consumer differ from these countries?
Everyone has their own rules and regulations. I'm more familiar with Canada and the States than I am elsewhere. But it's the kind of like in the US, you've got to, if you want to break down a carcass and sell cuts, and if you want to ship out with your states, you've got to go USDA. Here in Canada, like we go to a provincially inspected facility, so I can only ship within BC. I cannot ship to Alberta. I cannot ship to the States unless I go to a federally inspected facility, and there's not many of them around. But saying that, there's millions of people in BC. I have a huge customer base here. I don't need to ship further. But in the States, if you do USDA, you can ship anywhere. Though one of my students is from Virginia, and if they go to I think something like a Virginian inspected, they can ship all across their counties within their state. So they can break down a carcass, it just can't leave the state. So I think even little states have their own little bylaws and things. Australia was the same, that the licensing was held with the processor, so you had to use an inspected facility, and the same in the UK.
Hmm. Now, I'm assuming whenever you're talking to these folks as well, outside of just leveraging direct to consumer, do you talk about just leveraging the power of social media in terms of marketing that your actual the specific farm and ranch?
Yeah, so my whole approach, so like when we moved here, I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. When we moved here, we released equity in our house on the coast to purchase the one I'm sat in now. And we were carrying two mortgages. And then the property market crashed. So it was a very scary time because then their house on the coast wasn't worth what they remortgaged it
Oh wow.
for. So it eventually sold at a loss. So the bank then was like, we're super nervous because the property you have now doesn't cover the two mortgages at all. So they actually started to foreclose on the ranch here. And it was like, holy crap, really? Like that? No, like this is working. They're like, well, we're getting nervous. I mean, long story short, we kept providing them with order books. Like we went from 6 a month to 8 a month to 10 a month. We had an order book pre-booked 6 months in advance. Like I was like, I have all these orders. And they're like, yes, but we don't have any audited accounts because we were so new. So then it takes 12 months to foreclose on a ranch. It's not like a house, which is 3 months. So at around about the 8 or 9 month mark, we went over this account manager's head to her boss and said, look, we are bringing in $50,000-$60,000 a month revenue, and we have done for the last 8 months. Like, surely this is now being proven that this is a business model that works. And he was like, okay, yes. So then it all kind of settled. They wrote off all the interest. We ended up in our favor because at the end of the day, we were doing exactly what we said we would do in our business plan. It was them that kind of said, whoa, we're nervous now. So, but in that time, it was very stressful,
I
like
can only
very,
imagine.
very stressful. And everything we had was going into making the business work. So I didn't have I didn't have any spare cash flow to put into ads or like I didn't know enough to go and pay someone to go like thousands of dollars and then ad spend with no guarantee that it's going to work. It was like, I can't. I know it does work, but at that point it was too much of a risk. So everything was organic growth. It was building our social media to the point where people recognize our brand. Like, people recognize it hours away because that's how much we built our brand. But it was all done organically. So for people who are maybe not into writing copy and posting ad sets and doing A/B testing, and like, I don't know many farmers who want to go down that rabbit warren. So I try to make it as easy as possible, and it's just organic. Like, I do a whole section within the course going, boosting ads and running ads will make things happen faster, and there's a right way and a wrong way, and I hope that this is the right way if you want to try it. And a few of the students have, for like faster growth, they're like, wow, we're sold out, and they make back their ad spend. But not everyone can do that. Not everyone has the luxury of, I'm going to throw $50 a day at this ad on the hope that I'm going to sell something at the end. So that's kind of that's where I came from, was because we didn't have that luxury. I've kind of assumed that not everybody does. So if they want to do it, amazing, and they'll get faster results, but you don't have to.
That's what I found funny on some of the comments that I would see under your post, of just really negative comments. I mean, you've lived through I'm sure that was stressful and a hellish time, and so you have the skin in the game with this, and you're not just grifting. And what other the comments I was seeing under some of the posts were just,
I'm
how,
trying to think. I know that some people get all about, oh, it would never work, or that's your revenue, but what's your profit? And I'm like, read the caption. Everything's in there. Like, everything. I am not hiding a thing. And we work to a 35% profit. So obviously our costs are high because we're doing 20 head a month. So when I say we're bringing in 80K revenue, that's 20 head a month though, every month. But our costs are high, but we still work to a 35% profit. So I don't know. To me, it works.
yeah, no, for sure. And so is it just you and your husband?
And three very lovely children.
Wow. So
Yeah,
so
it
you're
is.
doing both the social medias, and then I guess the next question would be, is how are you able to manage everything? Because you've got obviously the mom life and the family life, plus the ranch, plus helping other farms and ranches, and just everything on social media. That's a
It's a
lot.
lot.
Yeah.
It is a lot. Have you ever heard the expression, if you want something done, ask a busy person?
No.
Maybe it's like a Scottish thing. Like, maybe it's something my mum used to say a lot, that if you want something done, ask someone who's already doing things. Like, don't ask
Hmm.
someone who has nothing to do, because it won't get done, even though they have all the time, because you procrastinate. So I don't know. It's like, it's organized chaos. It is, but it's organized. But I don't know. It's compartmentalizing and scheduling and using your time wisely. Like this morning, I was a little bit late because we were doctoring a calf, and then a cow. Then it was like running up here, and then I'm glad the camera wasn't on because I was stripping off all my layers. But it's just you find time, and we still find time for downtime. Like, that's super important. But people who say they don't have time, you do have time. You just have to make time.
I definitely agree with that. I'm trying to think on the next. So, in terms of the cattle that you have, whenever is this the same type of cow whenever you first bought back in 2014, or whenever you were looking into that, what made you decide on the specific? Uh,
um so in 2014, we just went to the auction and just bought four steers, the four like feeder steers. They were Herefords. I think we have one Hereford now. It's not a breed that we use. So um we're very big on, because we're first generation, we don't have any preconceived ideas. We don't have any, that's how we've always done
mm,
it. So that's how we're always going to do it. We have picked breeds that suit our environment and that suit our model. So we're very hands off. Every time you touch a cow, that's money. So we want breeds that don't need much intervention. So we don't want to be pulling calves. We don't want to be doing calf check every 2 hours because you might have to pull a calf. So a wagyu, we have wagyu. Their babies are tiny. I think I posted a video on our ranch page of a wagyu baby, and they're like pocket size. They're tiny, but they grow really fast. But they're little, and they just slip right out, like no intervention necessary. Um, and then the breeds. So we have a wagyu bull. We have Galloway bulls. So their main breed of our herd are Scottish breeds. Not because I'm Scottish, but because they suit our environment. We're very mountainous. It gets very cold in the winter. It gets very hot in the summer. And we have Highlands and Galloways. So they have a very thick coat that keeps them cool in summer and hot in winter. And the Highlands have these horns that help regulate their body temperature. You should never dehorn, really. Like when it's super hot outside, they flush blood through the horns to keep them cool. And
Wow.
when it's cold outside, they use them to bring extra blood into their bodies. Like if you cut their horn, they bleed. So they use these big horns for temperature regulation. And also, they need less input for the same output. So by that, I mean they need less feed because they don't need extra feed to keep warm, but you get the same amount of beef at the end. So they work really well for our feed program where we don't feed any grain.
That is, I didn't know that about their horns. That's actually mind
Hmm.
blowing. I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, but that's just still pretty mind blowing.
Yeah, we got this herd dispersal like when we were still building our herd, and it was a herd dispersal from somewhere up north, and there was two highlands in there, but they'd cut their horns, and these two highlands, they didn't do well at all. Like they didn't thrive in the winter. They looked awful, and they really suffered in the summer. Like it was a shame kind of seeing how much they do rely on their horns.
Hmm. Do you plan to just stick with just cattle and just continue to doing what you're doing now, or are there other types of animals or anything else that you would want to potentially incorporate?
um we do think like we have a chicken tractor,
Hmm.
more from the regenerative side of things. And we have a pig that we use for ourselves. Like she's a garburator, and we get bacon seeds, but we don't we don't produce pork or chicken. Like it's just for us. Like beef is our mainstay. Um, and I mean, one of our philosophies is if you want to do something well, then just do one thing. Like, we're not ready to diversify yet. I mean, maybe when the kids are older, they might want to do lamb or pork or chicken, and it could be an add-on. But right now, all our energy is in beef. That's kind of what we're going to stick with.
On the topic of beef, so since I live in Texas and cattle's obviously really, really big in Texas.
Hmm.
Um, I guess what would you, if you were to have any advice for cattle ranchers in terms of marketing their beef online? Are there strategies or anything that you would recommend them outside of, I know the just doing the direct to consumer? I know it's kind of a vague question.
Tell your story. Like, um, your story is massive. Like, don't discount your story. It might not seem interesting to you, but if you think about where your customers are, they're going to be in these big urban hubs, and they find a ranching story kind of romantic. That tell your story, no matter what that is. And um, something that a coach said to me last week was, "Don't compete, contrast." And it really stuck with me that if you try and be the same as everyone else, and you're going to try and compete on price or compete on offers or compete, everything gets lost in the noise. Whereas if you contrast, if you make yourself stand out because you focus on your differences, then you can have so many players in the same locality, but you all have a unique selling point. So you might have one Texas rancher who does longhorns, and he can really start singing the praises of, how it's a leaner beef. You can use the heads for mounts. They have those horns for temperature control. They can really start using those unique selling points of the Longhorn to make them stand out, not compete, but stand out against a farmer who breeds Angus or a farmer who breeds Brahmas, or you know what I mean? Like you would like pick your strengths and focus on what makes you stand out, and then just let the customer choose, because you're not going to appeal to everyone. But unless you put your strengths out there, you're just going to be noise. Like everyone's going to look the same.
I love that. I guess my last question would be on the flip side. What would you have advice for the consumer side of things? Because I wholeheartedly agree that the consumers drive the price. That's actually why I have Regenaissance in the first place, of just trying to raise awareness and educate around this whole
Mm.
entire just agriculture and just going back to our food, because the dollars drive the business and drive to where the market heads. So yeah, I'm just curious if you have any advice for the consumer side.
Um, I mean, consumers, I find that they don't compare apples for apples. So the cheapest, most economical way to buy beef, if you have the freezer space, is to buy bulk. So instead of going to the store and buying a couple of pounds of ground and a couple of steaks every week, if you can buy in bulk, you're going to save yourself money. You're going to have access to amazing meat like at your fingertips whenever you want a snack. And you're going to support a local farmer and rancher and support your local economy. And if the more that they realize this and the more they push and drive for that, then the price of the whole farm to fork will come down. It's good for everyone.
I agree. Well, thank you for joining, Amy. If there's anything that you'd like to plug before we go.
I don't know. If you are a farmer or a rancher and you want to get started selling beef, then check out Sell Beef Direct. There's loads of free resources on my Instagram, on my website. Sign up to my newsletter, and then I do have programs and documentation and courses. I have a free Foundations for Farmers course right now. It's literally will teach you how to navigate social media, which I think is super important, and it's free, 100% free. Um, and then if you want to learn more about regenerative agriculture and about our style of farming, even if you can't buy our beef, then check out our ranch page, which is at Waikikahei.
Well, thank you, and I'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.